Hello fellow nerd. Today's video is going to be slightly different. It's still Dungeons and Dragons themed, of course, but today I will be introducing my Dwarven Fighter. As you may know, I am the DM of a campaign, a slightly homebrewed version of Curse of Strahd, but I am also a player in a different group, and this dwarven lady is my character in that group. Coincidentally, we are also playing Curse of Strahd, but that's a different topic, how to handle the very same setting as a DM and as a player. That's a story for another time. So let us talk about Hadolin, my Mountain Dwarf. She's a fighter, currently level 4, but after the last session our DM insinuated that we're about to level up if we survive the next encounter, that is. Anyway, let's go over her stats before we move on to the interesting parts. I should probably start off with saying that we rolled the stats. And I rolled really well in the beginning. So she has currently 15 points in strength. That's a +2 modifier. She has 18 points in dexterity. That's a modifier of +4. And this tells you that she is a dex-based fighter. She has 16 points in constitution with a modifier of +3. 13 points in intelligence. That's a modifier of +1. She has only 10 points in wisdom. That's a modifier of 0. And, drumroll, her dump stat is charisma. She has 7 points in charisma. That's a modifier of -2. Funny enough, she's rather standoffish, but every time she tries to intimidate someone, she usually fails because charisma is not her strong suit. So, moving on along the character sheet, her proficiency bonus is currently +2. Now her speed is a 35, and you may wonder, 35? That's weird, because dwarves, although they count as medium-sized, only have a base speed of 25. But she took a feat that gave her extra speed. That's why she's the smallest and the fastest character in the group. She has usually 47 hit points because, again, I rolled really well. But due to an unfortunate encounter with the vampire lady, her maximum hit points are currently reduced to 37. We haven't yet figured out how to remedy that. Anyway. She has an armor class of 16. Her initiative bonus is +4. As a dwarf, she has resistance to poison. She has also advantage against saving throws regarding poison. And she is proficient in strength and constitution saving throws. She is proficient in acrobatics, intimidation, sleight of hand, and stealth. Her passive wisdom perception is a 10, her passive intelligence investigation is an 11, and her passive wisdom insight is also a 10. She has dark vision because she's a dwarf with a range of 60 feet. She is proficient in heavy armor, light armor, medium armor, and shields. Now that's a mix of her class and her race. She's proficient with martial weapons and simple weapons. And her two proficiencies are calligrapher's supplies, mason's tools, and thieves' tools. She speaks Common, Dwarvish, and Undercommon. Now, as a dex-based fighter, she wields a rapier and a hand axe. She chose the two-weapon fighting style. You may wonder why I gave her a hand axe as a second weapon and not something that deals more damage. This is a choice I made for flavor. I think she's a dwarf. She has to have an axe, let's be honest. And although she really cherishes her rapier, she's emotionally attached to her hand axe because it was a gift from one of her brothers, about whom we will talk later on. Now, two-weapon fighting for a fighter means that as a bonus action I can use my offhand weapon and add my ability modifier to the damage. As a dwarf... Wait, is it as a dwarf or as a fighter? Anyway, she can use second wind, which means once per short rest she can use a bonus action to regain 1d10 plus 4 hit points. She can also use action surge, and that's a fighter feat, which means that she can take one additional action on her turn. This can be used once per short rest. Now, as a subclass for her I chose a Battlemaster, which means that she gained superiority dice. She learned maneuvers that are fueled by superiority dice. Maneuvers enhance an attack in some way, and currently she has 48 per short rest. And she has currently 3 maneuvers. The first one is parry. When another creature damages you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction and expend 1 superiority die to reduce the damage by the number you roll on your superiority die plus 4. The second maneuver she learned is riposte. When a creature misses you with a melee attack, you can use your reaction and expend 1 superiority die to make a melee weapon attack against it. Add the superiority die to the attack's damage. And the last maneuver is disarming attack. When you hit with a weapon attack, you can expend 1 superiority die to add it to the damage and to disarm the target if it fails a strength saving throw with a DC of 14. Now, I thought I was very clever about this. I chose 2 reactions, one if she's hit and one if the attack misses her. And I thought disarming attack is really clever because the attacker is then forced to drop their weapon, right? Now the problem with the enemies we have encountered so far is that they are all magic users. Great. They can't drop anything. So, what else do we have? Well, let's look at her equipment. She has 2 hand axes. The usual starting equipment. Her rapier. My DM graciously allowed me to start off with studded leather armor, hence her 16 armor class. She has also, in addition to her starting equipment and the equipment granted by her background, 2 wooden stakes, which were handed out to all the party members by the paladin, and a shard of a mirror, also handed out by that paladin. I also think we all have candles because, without going too deep into our campaign, we are currently in Vallaki. We have been in Vallaki for at least 5 or 6 sessions, and the paladin tried to instigate a revolution, and the sign of the supporters is a candle on the windowsill at night. That's why we all have candles to hand out to people that support our cause. Yeah, we are way too invested in the side quests. Anyway, she also has a little pouch with herbs that help her sleep, and that will be useful information when we come to her background. But first, let's look at her features and traits. I have already mentioned her fighting style, which is 2-weapon fighting. I have also mentioned Second Wind and Action Surge. Her martial archetype is Battlemaster. Oh, yes, I forgot this. Her subclass also includes something called Student of War, and that gave her proficiency in 1 type of artisan's tools, and I chose calligrapher's supplies because I just thought it's cool. Has a little samurai feeling to it. Fun fact, our Tabaxi warlock is definitely trying to be a samurai. He's also proficient in calligrapher's tools, even though he can't even read, if I remember correctly. Anyway. Oh yes, of course. The racial traits. I have mentioned dark vision. The Dwarven resilience gives her advantage on saves against poisoned and resistance against poison damage. Her Dwarven combat training gave her proficiency with the battle axe, the hand axe, light hammer and warhammer. She's proficient with mason's tools. That's also relevant to her backstory. She didn't always want to be a fighter, and her mason's tools are a reminder of that. Now as a dwarf she has stone cunning. Whenever you make an intelligence history check related to the origin of stonework, you are considered proficient in the history skill and add double your proficiency bonus to the check. And finally, the Dwarven armor training. You have proficiency with light and medium armor. Now, I chose a feat for her. It was a tough call between alert and mobile, and I opted for mobile. Your speed increases by 10 feet. When you use the dash action, difficult terrain doesn't cost you extra movement on that turn. When you make a melee weapon attack against a creature, you don't provoke opportunity attacks from that creature for the rest of the turn, whether you hit it or not. That's helpful. Although I do have questions about that, because 2 weapon fighting gives me 2 attacks. Now let's say I am fighting 2 vampires in melee range, and I hit both. Can I then move away without provoking opportunity attacks because of the mobile feat? I would say yes, but I haven't dared to try it yet. We are fighting a lot of vampires, and they are really strong. The warlock nearly died last time. Everyone was quite sad. Now what else? Ah yes, her background. I started off with the Haunted One background, which I completely misunderstood. I thought Haunted One would also work for a character that suffers from some sort of trauma, but my DM interpreted it in that way that the Haunted One is haunted magically, like Call of Cthulhu magically, and she then allowed me to change the background 3 or 4 sessions in, I think, and I opted for custom background. Which gave her the criminal contact feature. You have reliable and trustworthy contact who acts as your liaison to a network of other criminals. You know how to get messages to and from your contact, even over great distances. Specifically, you know the local messengers, corrupt caravan masters, and seedy sailors who can deliver messages for you. Now, in this character sheet, I don't have the rest of her custom background. I think it was a mix between criminal and soldier, and we are basically already into her background. First of all, her parents are still alive. Yay! Her brothers are still alive. Yay! So no sad backstory in this regard. She is from a city called Mazama, and some of you may recognize this because it sounds a lot like Ozama, doesn't it? Now, from which franchise is the city of Ozama? Dum 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 dum. Correct, Dragon Age. So, she's from the city of Mazama. She has 2 older brothers who are named Glowin and Belen. as always, extra credit if you can tell me where I got these names from. In her family, it's tradition to join the city guard. Her brothers are in the city guard. They are very well respected dwarves. So, as a young dwarf, she joined the city guard as well. She had trouble in the beginning to step out of her brother's shadows and make a name for herself, but eventually she proved herself and worked her way up, and all seemed to be well. She was successful in a job she hadn't wanted to take up in the first place. If it had been her choice, her free choice, she would have become an artist. She always liked working with stone, hence the mason's tools. But it was unthinkable in her family. She had a tradition to uphold. So she joined the city guard and essentially became a soldier. And one day she was finally granted command over a patrol, a small group of scouts that roamed outside of Mazama. And during this patrol, they were ambushed. And instead of calling a retreat, she pushed the attack, underestimated the enemies, especially the spellcasters. And her squad was decimated. Most of them were killed. Some of them were kidnapped. And she herself got lucky, if you will. In the heat of battle, she stumbled and fell into a ravine where she was hidden out of sight, and she didn't get back up. Instead of rejoining the fight and helping her comrades, she just lay there, motionless with fear. And looking back, even decades later, she's a middle-aged dwarf now. That memory still fills her with shame and anger at her own cowardice. She feels responsible. She knows she abandoned her comrades. She knows it's her fault that they were ambushed, and that to her knowledge everyone died or was taken prisoner and possibly enslaved, who knows. So that shame is what drove her away from Azama. As she lay in the ditch, she decided that she wouldn't return. She wouldn't return because she didn't want to face the consequences of her actions. So instead, she left and wandered around. She worked as a mercenary. And she worked for basically anyone who would pay her. That's where her criminal background comes into play. She used to work for a cartel run by Bartok the Blind, who's a male orc. And it was really Bartok who taught her how to pick locks, how to pick pockets, how to bribe the city guard, how not to behave like a soldier all the time. Her family believes she's dead like the others, except her brothers. They doubt that she died because they didn't find her body. So I left that door open for my DM to maybe have her meet her brothers. Who knows? Maybe her past will catch up with her in some way. I don't know. Now all this influences her to this day. On the one hand, she would rather be alone, be self-reliant, don't be responsible for anyone else because she's afraid that she will fail them again. On the other hand, she's terribly lonely because the one thing she really loved about the city guard was the camaraderie, and that's why she's sticking with the group she's currently with. Because if she stays with this ragtag band of weird people, she's not alone. And even though she tries not to be responsible and not get emotionally attached to them, she's saving the squishy warlock all the time and making sure she takes the hits and he doesn't. Yeah. Now, her backstory has direct consequences on a very specific game mechanic, because in order to deal with all of this, and this is her greatest flaw, she took up drinking. And now you might say, oh well, she's a dwarf, of course she's drinking. No, she's an alcoholic. She drinks to function. She believes that alcohol helps with the nightmares. And if alcohol doesn't help, she takes herbs to grant her dreamless sleep, which most of the time just knocks her out and doesn't really help with the dreams. But you get the gist. She's an addict. And we have translated this into the way I play my character. So she can go without alcohol for 2 days. After that, she gets exhaustion points, and she can get up to 3. If you're unfamiliar with exhaustion points, the first one gives you disadvantage on ability checks. The second one halves your speed. The third one gives you disadvantage on attack rolls and saving throws. And we picked only the first 3. And now I'm on the spot. Are there 5 or 6 exhaustion points? I know the last one is death, but I think it's 6. 6 is death, 5 is you can't move, and 4 is you don't regain. You don't know. She doesn't have any spell slots. I don't remember. Anyway, that's a system we use to make her substance abuse have consequences in gameplay. Now, in order to get rid of 1 exhaustion point, she needs to drink 1 bottle of alcohol. And for pragmatic reasons, all alcoholic drinks count towards this, so that I don't have to, I don't know the different alcohol content in beer and vodka and the like. So the problem in Barovia is that there's only wine. She hates wine. She drinks schnapps mostly, but right now she'd go for beer, ale, whiskey, whatever. Wine is helping, but she's not enjoying it, if you can speak of enjoying alcohol in this case. Yeah. And as of last session, she's on her first day without alcohol, and we have just returned to the Blue Water Inn or Blue Water Tavern, and the wine is gone, and she has looked everywhere. Usually she tries to keep this secret. She doesn't talk about her past to her party members. I think the bard is onto something, because she saw her chug 1 glass of wine once. I think one of the warlocks is onto something, because he definitely saw her crawling into every cupboard, looking into every barrel to find alcohol. She just doesn't care anymore. She's desperate. And I'm really looking forward to the effects this choice has. I'm a bit terrified, because the encounters are already so high stakes. We barely survived meeting 2 vampires. And I'm already attached to this character. I do have a backup, because it's not looking good, but I really like her. She's awesome. She's feisty and gruff, but kind at the same time. Yeah. She's really cool. I hope she survives for a while longer. And I think that's all. I know I forgot a lot of things, her alignment, for example, but you get the gist. Maybe one day I will talk more about her. Maybe talk about the campaign she's in, although I feel I don't feel comfortable talking about that campaign, because it's not my campaign. I'm only a player, and I feel like I'm taking from the DM, if you know what I mean. I'll have to think about this. So, I hope you enjoyed this. I have no idea where this was going. Well, let's call this my very first rambling video. Yay! So, thank you very much for bearing with me. I had a lovely time, to be honest. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. Until then, bye bye, fellow nerds.